Welcome to MOTS, where we'll be applying the Manzer or Mosi-Thurlow scale of quantitative analysis of pop culture narrative through a binary system.
Or MOTS! This podcast contains spoilers, mature content, and language. Viewer discretion advised. Hello, I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, here with Scott Thurlow.
Hello.
And Stephen Ramosi.
Hello.
And welcome to a very special episode of MOTS. This will be a 3-part miniseries. We're going to be discussing True Detective Season 2, L.A. Confidential, and how similar they are. So this episode will focus on our impressions of True Detective Season 2, as well as an in-depth character analysis of all the major protagonists in the show. So Scott, you wanted to give a brief summary of this Season 2 of True Detective?
Yes, the briefest of summaries, which we'll explain later, but if you get it, it is going to be Carlito's Confidential. That's how I described it. I think we decided that's basically what happened, so we'll break it down why and how, but that's my description of it.
Now, True Detective has always it has not been about the plot, generally. Season 1 or Season 2. Season 2 is... I tried piecing it together, and it is a labyrinthine and not in the good sense. Fuck all of a story. So I feel that focusing on the characters is really what's important here. So we're going to go, in MOTS tradition, we're going to give each of our scores. We're not going to go over them in detail, why we're giving them all. If you would like to see what the individual scores we get, we're going to have a new section on the site, which is going to show why, what all the scores are, and a brief summary of, one-sentence summary of why we chose that. So, Scott, would you like to begin with your, what you rate the entire season?
Yes, I rated it a 3 on the MOTS scale, and I gave just to be clear, I gave a 1 to the hook, and a 1 to protagonist, and a 1 to the antagonist. Okay. Everything else got a 0 from me.
Steve?
I gave it a 5. My ones were the hook. I thought it was effective within its genre, at least to the extent that I, gave it a 1. It's a softish 1 on that one. But I thought that it achieved its goal by the end, kind of.
We'll get into that.
And then protagonist and antagonist, I also gave 1s to.
I gave it a 3, just as Scott. I believe the introduction was enough to keep me interested. I gave the protagonists a 1, and we'll go into depth about them later. And I gave the supporting cast a 1 because I felt they was sufficient. But overall, I wasn't a big fan, as you can tell, of the season. So, let's dive right in. Which character should we particularly start out with? Who's Colin Farrell's character name?
Ray Velcoro, yes. Detective.
So, I think as he would be probably the main
Traditionally,
protagonist.
he is, in quotes, the main character, yes.
So, what are all of your opinions of him? Scott?
There's one aspect of him I didn't quite like. I understand what they're trying to do with his character. This is more of my bias, but regardless, I didn't care about his relationship to his son. Like, that was highlighted, or at least they kept returning to that throughout the season. And I get it, I understand, like, what it was supposed to mean to his character. I just didn't care that much. I was more just the fact that he was, like, his early setup with Vince Vaughn's character, Frank Simeon, like, he murdered a guy that he thought raped his wife, and on the information that, like, this was supposed to be, like, 20 years ago, something like a long time ago, they ran into each other. He was sort of working for Frank within the bureau, a corrupt police department anyways. So I thought that was the most interesting thing about his character. I was hoping originally, like, that they set that up very nicely in the beginning, that's why I gave it a 1 to that. Yes, it was a good introduction, but I was hoping that they would explore that further, rather than just going back to his struggles. Oh, he's estranged from his wife, and they're suing each other for custody, etc. So I didn't particularly care about all that, but I agree that he was the most well-rounded character of them all. But even so, it still didn't quite grab me overall. Like, he was fine, yes, but there were bits and pieces of it that along the way, like, lost me bit by bit, if you will.
I like Colin Farrell's character. I thought that the early violent outbursts were a little bit over the top.
I agree with that.
But overall, I actually liked his whole arc with his son and his ex-wife, and how they tied it into his relationship with his own father, that type of thing.
Yes.
Overall, I thought he was well done, and I mean, I think a lot of it had to do with how well Colin Farrell did with the role himself. Like, as an actor, I think he pulled a lot more out of that role than a lot of other people would have done. Yeah, but I liked him.
My initial impression was that it was a very similar character to Russ without the philosophy from season 1. And I feel that Nick Palazzo, or however you pronounce his name.
I think it's Palazzo. I don't know.
Yeah.
Palazzi.
He has an affinity to that type of character.
I agree with that, yeah. He seems to want to write that type of character.
Yes. And I kind of like the fact that it wasn't as nihilistic as the character Russ was. This is a very real and well-rounded character. Steven?
I think that Rust... I actually disagree. I think they were pretty different in that Rust was a lot more in control of himself than Colin Farrell's character was. It seemed like he couldn't keep his shit under wraps, whereas Rust was very slow and thought about everything that he did. I thought that Ray didn't do that nearly as much.
Then maybe I shall reassess this by saying that aesthetically they're similar characters. In fact, they go the opposite transition.
Right.
Russ went from kind of clean-shaven to disheveled, where Colin Farrell's character went from disheveled to clean-shaven. But on that note, to the point of the sun, it didn't 100% work for me in that it really didn't go anywhere.
Exactly. That's what I'm going to say. We're going to say that about, I think, a lot of things, but that's one of them for sure.
Yeah.
But going back to the sun, yes, he loses his life because he went back to see his son, but it always almost felt like a one-sided relationship. And this character would have worked in another movie if there was some levity surrounding him. But he's just another tragic character without any grander meaning to it. Like, every single one of these have fatal flaws, and they all are just falling down constantly, and you never see them get a moment of uplift. And so, the son, yes, it's tragic that his love for his son caused his death, but again, it lacked that greater meaning. I'm trying to think what, his relationship with Annie was the character.
Antigone, I believe they called her Annie.
That was unbelievable. I didn't see any particular reason for them to get together.
I agree.
It seems like all these characters are playing by the numbers, in a sense, going along with what the script says they should do, rather than capturing the real emotions between them.
I absolutely agree with that. I just thought of this as sort of a joke reference to something else, but I think it is valid here. He's basically a walking cliche. He's disgruntled detective with ex-wife, and hey, buy now and get free drinking problem as well. There was a scene where after having a not satisfactory encounter, visit with his son, and he goes back and does a bunch of coke, and he gets drunk, and he's dancing around doing workouts in his little apartment, and that was supposed to I almost took that as a moment of levity. It was so not out of place, but executed poorly, I guess, that it made him seem less real and less sympathetic than it was supposed to be. And there were moments like that for him and the other characters as well throughout it that sort of took me out. That's why I gave a 0 to Immersion. Taken all together, you said something earlier, I'll try to rephrase a bit. They wanted to do something on paper, but how it was executed just didn't pan out the way maybe they intended it, or at least clearly not to me and probably to us. So therefore, the impact of it was greatly reduced.
So let me ask you guys a question. What was the message behind this character? What was the arc he was traveling?
He was trying to redeem himself. All right, as Steve said, he's difficult controlling his anger and his impulses, if you will. He also is reluctantly working with a criminal, although he respects Frank for who he is. He knows that they're on opposite sides of the law, ostensibly. I guess he just, he clearly wants to have a better relationship with his son. Early on, it's unclear, because of the, I'm going to say this is shoehorn force thing, and because they dropped the detail that, his wife was raped, a while ago, and it's unsure whether or not their son is his or not, till the very end. So, regardless, though, he portrays himself, he's trying to be a good father. He's I don't care. He's doesn't matter to me. He's still my son. That's fine. It's a noble thing to do, but it just, that was supposed to be his redemption arc, and was he redeemed by it? I mean, maybe in his own mind he was, And perhaps that is the point of it and the arc of it, but again, it still fell a little bit flat, as did many other things about this.
I kind of felt like his path to redemption was... His only path to redemption was supposed to be that he had to go deeper into the underworld that he had already become part of, because, you know, he made that one choice 15 years ago or whatever, 20 years ago, that... You know, the only path that he could see was to get deeper in.
What's that? Yeah, well, that's kind of a theme.
Also, I think the whole season was kind of about him having to let go of his relationship with his son.
All right, so you think that's his arc, is what you're saying?
Okay. I think that was one of his arcs, yeah.
I'm going to jump to this. So we start off, he's a wreck of a human being, haunted by his past choices and his general impulsive nature.
He's Mad Max.
So then he decides to actually pursue a criminal case for once in his life, starts to get everything together, lets go of his son.
Well, he doesn't decide. He's given that case because
yes,
his superiors are corrupt.
Yeah, but he could have made the choice
True.
to be the puppet they wanted him to be.
Right. He was supposed to not, really, follow that.
So he let go of his son with the custody. Nothing he does has any meaning after that. He lets go of his son, but he's still recording those messages to him, and the final scene of him is that the message failing to go through. And I actually think that's a very fitting last shot, or it's not the last shot of the series, but last shot for him, as it's a message that failed to come through. That, in a sense, all he is a character who decided to do the right thing and then made no positive changes in the world from that decision. All that happens to him is suffering of those around him.
Yes, but it seemed to me towards the end, at least, towards the last third of the series, the messages were more for him than his son. Like, he was redeeming himself in his own mind, trying to be a good father, whether or not it actually mattered.
And I think a big portion of what they were trying to say with the season was that, you know, you can be like your previous choices in life determine the rest of your life, regardless of how good or bad you try to be. Like, he made a choice to follow this one path.
I agree that's a theme.
Early in his life, and then I think the point of it was that he was completely impotent to change things as he went forward, and he just had to follow a path and choose. Towards the end, he chose to, quote unquote, do the right thing. But that didn't make any difference in the grand scheme of things.
But the way they mete out that kind of karmic punishment is inconsistent throughout. Like, some characters have bad things happen to them because of their past choices, and some
are karma Houdinis, if you know that trope. Yeah, I agree with that.
So I think this is the most effective character in the story, and I feel that he didn't have much of a meaning to him.
He was the most robust character, but again, it still fell flat, and other characters are going to fall a little bit flatter than that because of it. But yeah, as we said, they wanted the setup, and they attempted to use the things surrounding that setup that they thought would be perhaps effective, or at least round out the character, make him sympathetic, etc. Just that, again, the way they were handled and which ones they chose and to put when, again, detracted a bit from what their original intentions were, at least to me.
Let's move on to what I think is the secondary protagonist, which, I have to... Annie, I was going to say, or what's her last name?
Desirides. Detective Desirides, or Sheriff Desirides, actually, yes.
Would anyone like to give an overview of her, or give their thoughts?
Sure. So I will. I actually liked her. Sorry, did you want to go?
No, go. Okay.
Again, I liked her initially as a character. She had an interesting setup, an interesting little dynamic, and they rounded out her family dynamics were fine. Again, I understand what they were trying to do with all of that. It's just that, like you said, you said something very very well just now. The way it was all meted out, both her and other characters, but in particular her, I think, to me, the way they dropped the details surrounding her character and surrounding her past and so forth. Again, we're supposed to be effective. We're supposed to round her out. We're supposed to make you more sympathetic and make what she was doing. We're supposed to relate it to all that. But the way they did it, the way it was handled, again, didn't achieve that for me, and therefore it became somewhat cringeworthy at points. And I think I'll save something for you to say, because there's a detail they drop about her character, or they hint at it and then they outright say it to you, show it to you later on in the show, and that greatly reduces it diminishes her to a one-dimensional character from what could have been was approaching a 2.5D character, possibly could have been 3, but it completely negated a lot of things that they did.
I think that I would have liked to see a lot more with her and her of her father's past and how that affected her growing up. I think they badly mishandled
they
that
brushed
part
over
of her.
that dynamic, and it would have been interesting. I definitely agree with that. Go ahead.
When they introduced it, I was really looking forward to a lot having that whatever cult or whatever the hell he ran, tying into her
New Age spot,
story a lot, and it didn't really. I mean,
exactly.
They kept giving hints that it was what made her who she is, but they didn't really go into that clearly. They gave a lot of very vague generalizations about it.
Right, and just real quickly, not only that, when they gave those, they were haphazardly dropped throughout the series.
I also wanted to say one other thing. I was definitely not against the relationship, I guess, or whatever that she had with Valcor towards the end of the season, but I think they also badly mishandled that. And
yes.
They really needed to establish that much earlier on, and they didn't do it at all, and it just kind of came out of nowhere.
I like strong female characters, and she was a very interesting one. I know that there has to be kind of some psychological reason for her in television to have masculine traits. So they had initially that her father was kind of an absentee dad. She had to take care of her sister.
He was a hippie, essentially, a commune guy.
And he was philosophically hands off, so she had to be the responsible one in the relationship, or in the family. And that drove her to have kind of that domineering attitude. She also had that sexually, which it was nice initially to see a woman's sexuality handled so balanced. She could be domineering without being, for lack of a better word, a slut. But then they kind of totally ruined, they totally ruined it halfway through by saying that she was molested. And that's such a terrible...
That's what wait me to
say. Yeah,
it's a cop-out.
Yes.
But it's also saying that women cannot be, in charge of their own sexuality unless they have
without a traumatic
issue in their past.
Bullshit, I agree.
And I thought that was, so trite and old-fashioned, and considering that this is supposed to be a revolutionary show, it fell upon this trope and fell upon it hard.
Right, I agree with that. I'm sort of expand upon it. And what Steve was just saying, her character was completely mishandled in the end. Yeah, the setup was great. She was, a sexually free woman, and that's fine. But why though? Because she was molested back. Again, this is something from a Lost episode that no one's ever heard of. But it's the Hotline Miami thing. It's completely cheap. Is it characterization? Yes, but it's cheap as shit. It's just lazy. So, and I'm gonna go something to say. I did not like her relationship later on with Velcro because of this reason. It felt it was there because it had to be there, not because it made natural, organic sense for the characters to be doing that.
And that's exactly what I'm saying. I could completely understand if they developed the relationship throughout the series, but they didn't develop it at all until the end.
They sprinted towards the end.
Okay, but it's completely out of character for her.
Yeah,
because earlier on in the series, she uses her sister, who she had protection over, to get further in a sense, in the case.
Yes.
She puts her sister in danger against her sister's wishes in order to solve this thing. She's cold. She's shown to be a cold, calculated person. But when Vaquero comes around, she becomes a classic female, character that, she's soft around him. She's crying near tears on the phone, wondering if she'll ever see him again. I didn't buy the love angle, and I felt it was out of character for her to fall that easily in love with some guy she's known for a couple weeks now,
a couple months. But regardless,
and from the fact that she's carrying his child at the end, seemed again it seemed that this was completely 180 of who we've been led to believe this character is.
I would half agree with that, although she was in the first scene that she was in, she was shown to be very sexually aggressive and kind of detached from those relationships. But I guess what they were trying to say is that she found some common ground with him because they were both monsters at the end or whatever. But it did seem it just seemed like there's no reason for this there's no reason for this to be happening. Like, it just seemed like it was slapdash together, like at the end to give a romantic angle on the whole thing.
Exactly, that's exactly what it was. Like, yeah, it was completely like they sprinted to having that relationship, whereas there was no build up to it. And I'm gonna bring up one scene where, right after the party thing, like, yes, sure, she's coming off of like being on drugs or whatever, but that could have been handled again so much more than it was. If you guys remember, originally she's like starts to climb on top of Velcro and he's like, oh, I can't, like, whatever. But then like that happens anyway. Like, that was completely pointless. I thought it would have been interesting if he said they can't, and they never did. But it was telegraphed a mile away that they were going to regardless. So what was the point of that anyways? I don't know. And she says something again. She's like, oh, we saved each other or something like that. Like, that's so trite. Like, I couldn't stand it. That you're supposed to buy that, you're supposed to believe that, but it was unbelievable.
Now, I immediately thought of this. I don't know if anyone else in the world did, but like the end of that completely reminded me of the end of Planet Terror, which is like has the baby and she's like, it was just you and me, backs against the world. Yeah, like you never missed. Like it was just like
I
that
didn't
kind
think
of
about that, but I mean it's funny. But oh yeah, I mean
it was just that kind of like like epic ending without like the. I mean that did it well. I thought that movie was great, but it was because it was supposed to be like kind of a tongue in cheek.
It was earned.
Yeah, exactly. They built up to it without just slapdash, as you said, like sure. Like,
kind of, but like I think more that it was supposed to be tongue in cheek in that movie. It's a Grindhouse movie, whereas opposed to like this ending reminded me of that without
trying
having any of the
without having the angle of what it was supposed to be. I agree with that.
Exactly. I also had one question. Did you guys? So there was some point in this show, I don't remember what episode or anything, but like Desiree says every kid that grew up at that place like either killed them, like committed suicide, or became like sex worker, and then one became a cop, and it was me, and it was her, and like I didn't understand why that was the case. Unless all of them were supposed to have been molested or whatever. But it seemed like that only happened to her.
I don't remember that line. But even if I don't, it's a perfect example of like the stiltedness of this entire... Like, it's a good microcosm of
when she said... I think it was fairly early in the season, like the third or fourth episode. And when she said that, I was like I was interested in learning why that would have that effect on the kids. Or something like some explanation of it, and I didn't get anything.
They never touch upon it. Yeah, exactly.
Easy, molestation.
Yeah.
So what is her character arc?
As we said, all right. Well, before I answer that, I want to just touch one more time upon something you said. The reason she when it's revealed to the audience that she was actually like molested as a kid, it's coming off of her having done E essentially, right? That first of all, just real quickly, as far as I understand, that isn't how that drug works. Like you don't just have a drug flashback. Like I didn't believe that. Is what I'm saying. It wasn't believable. It was totally immersion breaking for me. And fine. So, but the point of it was to reveal that about her character. Okay, that's her arc. I guess to answer your question, she's supposed to find redemption, like in Velcoro's arms, where they confess to each other, and she feels sexually safe and comfortable with him. But that's again completely out of the blue. There was no reason she should do that. There's doing that because that's what you expect out of these characters, like out of these archetypes, even.
Yeah, I think that she was completely judged throughout this. Like, her character was completely judged throughout this by her relationship to guys.
Yeah.
Like, it starts off, she's with the other cop
guy, yeah.
There, and she kicks him out and, like, is basically man-hating, and then at the end she finds somebody that she can be with, and then that's, her redemption is her being with fucking
someone she
Velcoro. Yeah, and having his kid. Which is garbage.
I agree. But if you guys remember, there's also a little side thing. It was in with like maybe one episode, maybe two, where she gets sent to like therapy or like counseling, or she gets accused of sexual harassment and like sitting around with a bunch of other like old like crusty cop dudes like who are like getting counseling for being like sexual harassed, and like it could have been like a good subversion, but again it fell completely flat. Like and went fucking nowhere. Like there was they never touched upon it again after that.
I agree. Initially, I actually liked that scene quite a bit, but in context, the rest of the series, it didn't make
completely pointless.
Right. So thank you guys for making the point I was about that. So I'm going to go on to Frank now. Now, initially, I felt that Frank was perhaps the most interesting character that they had in this series, until I realized something that makes him the least interesting character in the series. Now, our buddy Nick Palazzo, or whatever is, has been accused in season 1 of plagiarism. We'll put a link in the description for if anyone wants more details on that.
Well, when we get him on the horn, we can
he'll explain himself
address that.
But for now.
But whether it was plagiarism or not, it did seem that he was heavily influenced by the philosopher that gave Rust's main diatribes that he gave. So I realized that it didn't stop with season 1. In fact, I was joking that season 2 could use some more plagiarism, but then I realized no, it did too much. Every single one of these shots and characters are things from other series or movies. L.A. Confidential, as we're going to do, but in this one, I realized
the most obvious one, at least.
Yeah. All right, we have a character who is a criminal who's trying to go legit, runs an entertainment business, is screwed over by a close associate, which causes him to get into a mob war, and then he's killed by a secondary mobster that he ignored for too long. Which is also the plot line of Carlito's Way.
That's my description.
Point to point.
No, you're right
it's
about
the
that.
exact same character arc, and I realized that after seeing the final episode when he gets killed by the Mexican guys. Like, I could just imagine the Mexican guy, oh, Penny Blanco.
What about us, Frank? Yeah. Sure.
So, I don't know, it destroyed me because this one character that had any life in him, I found out was Al Pacino all along.
Pacino did it. Sure, and I'm going to sort of expand upon that. It's funny because I agree with your initial statement that I thought he, in fact, was the most interesting character. He had the most interesting, circumstances surrounding him. And, I was most interested in following his story and what he was doing, taking over the clubs, etc., trying to go legit, and getting screwed over. But when you said it to me, it sort of, made me backtrack and realize, it is point for point that plot.
Even the ending, it's him telling his lover to go ahead without him. He'll meet up with her, and then he gets killed.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. The thing is, it didn't dawn on me at the time, but you having pointed it out, it diminishes it somewhat. But I still think he was still the most interesting character to me because I like the gangster stuff is sort of always more interesting, and just everything surrounding it. I thought I would prefer him having been the main character because I was more interested in Frank Simeon's dealings than I kind of was in almost anyone else's in the show. And, we were sort of bullshitting before the cast about, whether or not we thought Vince Vaughn, is the right role, is the right casting for that. That's sort of neither here nor there. He did a perfectly fine job. It's just that, you're right, they gave him a plot that already existed, and which sort of diminishes the interesting parts of it, because once you realize it's essentially the same thing, then you're right. It's sort of like I was going to say to you earlier, is it homage or plagiarism? I think in this case, it's the latter. So, given that, but regardless, I still think I like him the most of all the characters. Again, as I said, he had the most interesting little scenes here, and he definitely had my favorite scene, 1 or 2 at least, which I'll talk about later. But just all to your point, it diminishes it somewhat having realized that fact.
I thought that he was a pretty good character throughout. I liked the way that Vince Vaughn handled it. Some people did not, and I've heard very loud criticism about that from some of my friends and stuff.
And I think we agree on that.
I thought he did it. I thought he did a pretty good job, and I liked his arc, regardless of whether it's lifted straight from Carlito's Way or not. I thought that him, this guy this criminal on the rise, gets pulled back down to the street level and has to deal with all this bullshit, and then it's him struggling to keep what he has, kind of, and keep and he has his he has his wife who kind of stands by him through all this stuff.
No, or is that his wife or is just his girl?
I don't think they're married.
His special lady friend.
Yeah, she's a special lady friend.
Right.
But he has her with him, and I liked her character too. Actually, I thought that she did a good job of
she made
calling him out on his bullshit throughout the show. Sorry,
I was torn between her character because at times, again, she had
flashes of good characterization,
good strong female lead. And other ones where all she wanted to do was have his child, and it's kind of I that's less egregious than Annie's character, but still, overall, I think she did a phenomenal job. And I think, again, to your point about Vince Vaughn, I actually think he did a good job, to maybe a great job. But there's always a nagging feeling that this character could have been elevated by someone with a little bit more presence. And I keep getting drawn back to how Albert Brooks, of all people, handled the mob boss in Drive. I thought that was phenomenally done, and it needed Vince Vaughn lacked or maybe this could be a criticism on the directorial
and not so much him
that the tension that Albert Brooks brought to that, the menace, was lacking in Vince Vaughn, and that could just be a thing of the setting he's in, or the music, or the shots. So, but I think overall he did a very good job.
Well, maybe, but the thing is, his character is like unraveling. You thought he was all set up, and everything's falling apart. Everything's portraying. Everything's going to shit. He doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't even know who's fucking him over till the very end, anyways. So, like, maybe, like, perhaps I'm giving the show more credit than it's due here on that. Like, perhaps that's why he's not supposed to be as menacing in the end. Like, all right, when he rips out, when he fights the guy, the owner of one of the clubs, and he has the fuck you thing on his the teeth,
his grill.
Things. Yeah, his grill. And he's like, so like he's trying to reestablish him as a badass. He's like, Frank is still a badass, and that was a fine scene. But then it starts to unravel, so he's no longer a badass.
See, the thing is, I can never buy that Vince Vaughn is cold-blooded.
All right, fair enough.
And I think that's one of the main issues with that.
Maybe,
like, and perhaps that's the point.
I don't think the character was supposed to be cold-blooded, though. You know, like he did things that he thought he had to do because that's how. I mean, when he told the story about being in the basement, that I thought that was a good
first thing, right?
setup for his character being the way that he was because he did what he had to do to survive, and like that's what he thought that he had to do to survive. And like if you gotta act, you know, if you gotta pull somebody's damn teeth out to prove your dominance in that situation, then you have to do it.
Sure. There's one more thing. Like one of my favorite scenes, like towards the end when he realizes Osep set him up and he's going to burn all the clubs and stuff. So he has to clear out the casino, and he says there's a gas leak, whatever, so everyone leaves. And one of the OSEP's thugs comes over and said, "Boss wants to know where gas leak is." And he goes, "Oh, it's right over," and shoots him in the head. Like, that was a pretty good scene, but to Ian's point, it was a fucking Scorsese scene, really. Like, you know, was that an homage, maybe? Or was it plagiarism? That one's pretty shadows the line. I liked it as a scene, but you've seen that a lot. You know, it was one of the stronger ones, I thought, for his character. Like, at that point, his character, he was unraveling, as you said. Right. He's doing what he thinks he has to do to get out of this, and they'll survive any way he can. I just wanted to mention that scene. That was one of the better ones, I thought, that if they're using like cliches and all, you know, taking bits and pieces here and there from other things, at least that one was pulled off better than most.
Frank is again, this is the same problem with Colin Farrell's character. That both these characters work in isolation or in a different context. Because we're seeing a man who's trying to do good being dragged back down by his actions. But there's nothing... Like, there's no good message here. It's just that, like, bad people do bad things, and if you're a good person who did bad things...
You might do bad things again.
Bad things will happen to you. So there's no winners in this story.
I don't think there were supposed to be. I mean, like, at the end of the first season, did you think that Rust and Marty were winners in that?
Those are bittersweet, and there's no, like, sweet to this. It's
right,
just
that's true.
100%
corruption is always going to win.
I think they tried to give you like the sweet part of the bittersweet at the end, where it's the two girlfriends or whatever. So but like,
two women
I think they missed
$100,000 on the run with a child is a sweet ending.
And Venezuela.
I think they misfired on that one too. But you know, I think that's what they were going for.
Two things. It's not Nails is also there. His
yeah, that's true.
Frank's best right hand man is guarding them or whatever's with them. This is a humorous thing I want to point out. But
the guy with no personality.
His name is Nails. It doesn't need to be.
Which one?
Yeah, that's also true.
I guess. But sorry, just wanted real quick before we move on. This is my final thought. When I saw the trailer for season 2, and there was a really like excellent scene of them sitting in that little dive bar, Vince Vaughn and Colin Farrell sitting across from each other. Like you said something. They're like staring daggers at each other. That was cool. I thought that set it up as if the whole season would be about like their interaction, like they're like battling each other, like trying to one up each other, put leverage to each other. Like they were pretty much like friends in the end. Like that's like Frank was like, yes, in the beginning he had like, oh, I have leverage over you, but they actually became friends.
I wish it had been.
Yeah, exactly. And that's
given us an actual antagonist.
Exactly,
you know?
And that sort of diminished it. Like I thought Vince Vaughn was going to be the villain of the season, when in fact he was sort of a villain protagonist and plus 3 other ones. So it sort of like slow rolled me there. I agree with you. Like, and I think you agree with me that it would have been more interesting if that was the actual arc of the the whole overarching plot of the series.
All right, so we're gonna go on to perhaps the least interesting character.
Perhaps.
No, by far the least interesting character.
The highway patrol.
He may not be the least. He was the worst characterized. Yes. Mm-hmm. Woodrow, I believe, is his name. Paul Woodrow.
So would anyone like to give a little?
I thought that they could have done good things with him, I never really liked the actor who was playing him from the first episode, so like that kind of ruined him for me.
You already biased.
But they also just, the whole thing with him turning out to be gay seemed like the romance to be completely slapdash.
Completely just superfluous.
They didn't use it well. I mean, they didn't even bother to like really try to do the blackmail thing very well. It was like one picture on his phone. He's like, "Oh shit, my life's falling apart," and then he just goes, and that's it. Like, they didn't do any exploration into it really. I think it was over the course of like 2 or 3 episodes in an 8-episode season they actually discussed it. I think it should have been. I think if that's his main characterization point, like that he's like in the closet and he's really ashamed of it, then they should have spread that out over the whole season. That should have been something that was at the forefront of his character the whole time.
It's just as cheap as the molestation thing. And like, I'm going to say everything I'm going to say about his character in 2 questions to pose to you guys. 1, if he was not gay, what does that change? 2, if he was removed from the plot altogether, what does that change?
Not much. I mean,
nothing.
Him being dead at the end.
That's my whole point. Yeah,
it was like the reason that they went back instead of running
but
away.
But
like
switched that to the the DA or the Internal Affairs woman.
They didn't even give a shit about her.
No, but
they were like, "Oh, she's dead. Oh, we gotta go."
No, but by that time they realized they were being set up.
She was the reason that they were running away, and then he was killed, and they were like, "Well, we can't go anywhere. We have to like finish this or whatever."
That's what I'm saying. So as I pose those questions to you, like that's what I mean. It was like they again they seem to have a setup and had a number of like character traits and so forth that they wanted to impart and have him have an arc, but they got rushed, or they didn't know how to handle it, or they just didn't. They clearly not they just didn't. They outright did not handle it correctly. So therefore, it completely negated his character, and he had nothing to do with anything in the end.
There's a comics writer named Kelly Sue DeConnick who does a bunch of good comics. The big one that she's doing right now is called Bitch Planet. It's like a huge like feminist hit right now, but she posed a really good question, which I think applies to not only his characterization but also the romance between Antigone and Valcoro, which is like if this plot point or this person can be replaced by like a lamp in the room, like just
they're completely
get it out of your story. It's not worth being there. Like if you can just replace this with anything else, then it's not worth being in your story.
Agreed. So like I said, like again, they had an okay, like the first scene is he pulls over, or like the background is he pulls over the actress or whatever, and like he's like that's an interesting setup. He's being accused of like soliciting her, blah blah blah. And I think the most interesting thing, again, they dropped a cool detail. He worked for Black Mountain, which is XP for like the PMCs in like Afghanistan.
Blackwater.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. So I again, in the same way I was saying how I thought Vince Vaughn and Valcuro would or Colin Farrell would be the again set against each other. I thought the Black Mountain thing would be a bigger part and would be brought in as part of the whole connecting to this and that. No, it was just there and sort of like dropped and didn't matter at all.
That's where I think this show really failed this season. Is they had a lot of really interesting things that should have been connected to everything that was going on.
Yeah, they were jerked off in there and then never touched again.
Like, if you really wanted to make it interesting, I'm not saying that you have to do this to make an interesting story, but the way that they did it was not good. And if you're going to introduce these things, explore them. Like, what's the point of him being part of that?
Exactly what you're saying.
What's the point of the spa or whatever the hell?
An interesting quote I heard, and I don't remember where I read it from, but it's like the creator treated this series as if he had a lot more time than he did. And
that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, that's a good. It was obvious to me.
That's a good way to put it.
To bring this back to the characters for a second. All right, you can say one of the major themes of this is that everyone has a kind of dark past that they can't keep hidden. So, Colin Farrell's character killed the guy back in the day. He's unsure.
And he was the wrong guy anyways. Yeah.
So he's haunted by that. You have Frank's Vince Vaughn's character, who has like a criminal enterprise and all the horrible things he did there. You have the highway patrol guy
Paul Woodrow, I believe is the character,
who has the crimes he did as a PMC. But I think more prominent to his character issue is homosexuality, and since they don't really treat it as a positive thing in this. It's never that he learns to embrace it. It's something he's ashamed of and gets killed because he's ashamed of it.
He's getting blackmailed over
And then Annie has really nothing in her past that haunts her aside from being a strong female. And
No, that's not true.
Well,
she
she
has
has-
molestation
yeah.
that she blacked out and then flashes back to.
But again, like
20 years later.
have
Nothing that she's done in her past,
Yeah.
I think you mean.
Yes, that she's. Although she says she enjoyed being like her or something like that.
She was ashamed of feeling pretty because of it, or some like
Yeah.
it was some bullshit. Like again, it was so stilted that we understood what they were trying to go for, but the way it's pulled off, you're just like, ugh.
So I don't know. Whatever theme was there, I think failed. It wasn't like not all the characters had equal horrors. So,
Right. I agree with that.
So,
Yeah.
anyone have any parting thoughts?
Yeah. So like, I thought sort of this is sort of my final or secondary synopsis. This entire season was schizophrenic. Like it tried to do one thing and then switch to another thing and totally forgot about it. And because of that, it made whatever effectiveness one side of it was supposed to have was negated by the other side by random things they dropped in and never touched again. You're like, oh, what happened about that? What happened to Black Mountain thing? What happened with the cult? Fuck you. Like it's just there. Or we're gonna try to address it, but because they devoted enough time to one, they tried to do a 50-50 split, ended up doing not enough split at all for it to become a fully realized story and characters who inhabit it.
Yeah, I almost feel like they should have done like 4 seasons of this, and each season could have concentrated on one character.
I want it to be the fucking Wire. Maybe it would have made it better, but I agree with that.
Well, it's not. It's never gonna be
Right.
The Wire, but
You're saying you're I get it.
like if they
Just
had
facetious.
followed one character for each season, I think it would have
Right.
been a more interesting thing, a more interesting show in general, and also they would have had time to explore all these things that they just dropped in and then fell off the face of the planet throughout the course of the season.
Exactly.
As my final thought, I'm kind of taking this as perhaps a postmodern film noir. Okay? Life is so complex that we can't see all the causation and everything, and there's no such thing as a happy ending. So these 4 flawed characters are attempting to battle
Navigate
against
their lives. Yeah.
the unknowable complexities and Byzantine machinations of life. There's no major plot here. There's no major villain. It's different sects all working to fill in this power vacuums that happen, and you can only try to survive, and most of us end up dying. So perhaps this is a brilliant show, and I'm
Just not seeing it, man.
but if it is so, I hate the execution because it just lost me. It infuriates me watching this. If the cliches are used to draw attention to cliches, it just turned into a cliche. I don't know. So maybe I'm too stupid to understand Nick Palazzato's vision.
No, that's Waldo-esque, man. Like you're getting shit out of it that they definitely did not intend, and you can't find Waldo because there's nothing there to find in terms of character.
I mean, despite the fact that I like this show, I think better than you guys did, or this season, that is. It just kind of meandered for a lot of it.
Exactly.
And it wasn't.
It's well put.
It wasn't nearly as tight as the first season was. And I think if they're going to do a 3rd season, I think they should definitely whittle it down to go back to the 2 character situation. I think that worked really well, and they were able to do it without losing their thread. You know,
I agree with that. I think maybe that's the whole problem. Like we just discussed 4 main characters, having to try to do 4 main characters in one single season and an 8 episode season at that. Just isn't enough time to get it all out. So therefore, that's why it felt rushed. Sure, 8.5. You get, they got an extra half hour. Yeah, you're right, E. That made up for everything else that they skipped upon earlier.
All right.
So that's my final thought.
This has been Bon Mots with an analysis of the characters in True Detective Season 2. We will be back shortly with L.A. Confidential, which has quite a bit of plot-related parallels and character parallels to Season 2. So perhaps this is one of Nick's favorite movies. So I'm Jonathan Niemanzer, here with Scott Thriller.
See you next time.
And Stephen Ramosi.
see you later.
And I wouldn't trade places with True Detective Season 2 for all the whiskey in Ireland.
This has been Bon Mots. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Music by Chris Morgan. Editing and engineering by Stephen Ramosi. This has been a Lost Signals production. All rights reserved.